Hello, everyone. I am Queen T, also known as Priestess Ifepomile Onwari Ogunyomi, and my beautiful co-host is.
Hello, I am Brandy A. McPherson. The cool kids call me Bam, and you may know me as Priestess Ajay Aife.
And today, this is our first official episode of Politics of a Priestess. And so today we are going to be talking about the religious colonization of America. And what that is basically why them people even ended up over here in the first place. Okay. This has nothing to do with that man that landed in the we're not talking about him. Okay. We're not talking about him today. We are purely talking about the Protestants and Puritans and people who left the United Kingdom to come here because of what they perceived as religious persecution. And so that is what this one is about today. The source that I'm going to be using for the first part of our discussion is the Library of Congress. And so that the link is kind of floating there at the bottom. That's not the complete link. But if you go to libraryloc.gov, you go to their exhibits section and then go to the religions section, and then you'll start to see a bunch of articles. And so this specific one was, it says West Indies, which we know we are not, but it kind of talks about the Mayflower and things like that. And so I'm not doing the entire article. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I am going to quote a good portion of it. So I wanted to make sure that it was cited so nobody tries to say that we are plagiarizing. And then we're going to have like a discussion about what we learned today. Okay. Now there was a lot of different places that I was actually reading, but this one kind of like laid it out in a way that I really kind of liked. And there's some things that I don't even think that we're taught in school about the who, where, what, whys, and hows. Like we know the Mayflower and we know religious persecution, but there's a lot of things inside of that. And so this article kind of breaks down some of it. And again, the link is down there if you want to go search for it and find the complete article and read all of it, because it was actually very eye-opening to read. And in the description, I will put the full link so you can go straight to the article. But Library of Congress has things that will help you learn. And it's interesting because that is a federal funded site. It's a whole other issue. We'll talk about that in another episode. Many of the British North American colonies that eventually formed the United States of America were settled in the 17th century by men and women who, in the face of European persecution, refused to compromise passionately held religious convictions and fled Europe. The New England colonies, now, that's where the name actually comes from. For those who did not know why it's called New England, it is because that is New England to the people that came here from England. The New England colonies, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, were conceived and established as plantations of religion. Just throwing that out there. And yes, it's quoted. That's why I did this. Some settlers who arrived in these areas came for secular motives, to catch fish, as one New Englander put it, but the great majority left Europe to worship God in the way they believed to be correct. They enthusiastically supported the efforts of their leaders to create a city on a hill, or a holy experiment, whose successes would prove that God's plan for his churches could be successfully realized in the American wilderness. Even colonies like Virginia, which were planned as commercial ventures, were led by entrepreneurs who considered themselves militant Protestants, and who worked diligently to promote the prosperity of the church. So, in case you missed that part, the state of Virginia was originally a business venture to help promote the prosperity of the church. Okay? All right. We got that? Let's move on. Because we'll talk about that. The religious persecution that drove drove settlers from Europe to the British North American colonies, notice how it's worded, sprang from the conviction held by Protestants and Catholics alike that uniformity of religion must exist in any given society. This conviction rested on the belief that there was one true religion and that it was the duty of the civil authorities to impose it forcibly if necessary, in the interest of saving the souls of all citizens. Nonconformists could expect no mercy and might be executed as heretics. The dominance of the concept, denounced by Roger Williams, who I will talk about later, as enforced uniformity of religion, meant majority religious groups who controlled political power punished dissenters in their midst. In some areas, Catholics persecuted Protestants, and others, Protestants persecuted Catholics. And in still others, Catholics and Protestants persecuted wayward co-religionists, which means people who were not either. So the indigenous people, for example, or people who practice witchcraft. So the Salem witch trials, which will get mentioned a little bit later. Let's see. Although England renounced religious persecution in 1689, it persisted on the European continent. Religious persecution, and observers in every century have commented, it is often bloody and implacable, as it's remembered and resented for generations. Puritans were English Protestants who wished to reform and purify the Church of England of what they considered to be unacceptable residues of Roman Catholicism. Imagine wanting to purge yourself from unacceptable residues of Roman Catholicism and leaving the country. And that's how we are here. Anyway, in the 1620s, leaders of the English state and church grew increasingly unsympathetic to Puritan demands. They insisted that the Puritans conform to religious practices that they abhorred, removing their ministers from office and threatening them with extirpation from the earth if they did not fall in line. Zealous Puritan laymen received savage punishments. For example, in 1630, a man was sentenced to life imprisonment, had his property confiscated, his nose slit, an ear cut off, and his forehead branded SS to stand for sour of sedition. Beginning in 1630, as many as 20,000 Puritans immigrated to America from England to gain the liberty to worship as they chose. Most settled in New England, but some went as far as the West Indies, which isn't, that's pretty far. And full of not white people. Anyway, theologically, the Puritans were non-separating Congregationalists. Unlike the Pilgrims who came to Massachusetts in 1620, the Puritans believed that the Church of England was the true church, though in need of major reforms. Every New England congregational church was considered an independent entity, beholden to no hierarchy. The membership was composed, at least initially, of men and women who had undergone a conversion experience and could prove it to other members. Puritan leaders hoped that once their experiment was successful, England would imitate it by instituting a church order modeled after the New England way. So that was a lot. And that's not even all of it. There's so much more in this original article. But I wanted to briefly talk about the actual first Bible. Not really the first Bible, but one of the earlier Bibles that was used in America before the King James Version. So this is also still from the same article. The Geneva Bible was published in English in Geneva in 1560 by English reformers who fled to the continent to escape persecutions by Queen Mary. That's Bloody Mary, by the way, for those of you who don't know. Bloody Queen Mary. The Virgin Queen, I think is what no, that was Elizabeth was the Virgin Queen. Don't listen to me. Um, their leader was William Whittingham, who married a sister of John Calvin. As you do your research, you will figure out who these people are. And I highly encourage you to do your research about every name that I say, because it's important that you know who these people are and how we got to this point. So the Geneva Bible was used by the Pilgrims and the Puritans in New England until it was gradually replaced by the King James Bible. According to one 20th century scholar, between 1560 and 1630, no fewer than about 200 editions of the Geneva Bible, either as a whole or of the New Testament separately, appeared. It was the Bible of Shakespeare and of John Bunyan and of Cromwell's Army and the Pilgrim Fathers. So, again, things that you need to look up. We already know who Shakespeare is. That was easy. Things you need to look up. The first edition of the King James Bible, also called the Authorized Version, was composed by a committee of English scholars between 1607 and 1611. The first copy of the King James Bible known to have been brought to the colonies was first carried by John Winthrop to Massachusetts in 1630. Gradually, the King James Bible supplanted the Geneva Bible and achieved such a monopoly of the affections of the English-speaking peoples that a scholar in 1936 complained that many, quote unquote, seem to think that the King James Version is the original Bible which God handed down out of heaven, all done up in English by the Lord himself. When I read that part, I hollered and I hollered and I howled and I screeched and squealed and screamed. Because, Priestess, as you know, as somebody who has been active in the church and your community for the whole time, you're a church kid, I'm a low-key church kid, you know what I'm saying? People really take the word of the Bible so to heart. Like the words in red, Jesus said it. Child, he didn't. He didn't. He didn't even speak English. He did not say that. It's not what he said. I promise. I promise. But literal. So I just said a lot of stuff, Priestess. I'll let you take it from here.
All good stuff. Look, you have me even taking notes for myself for our further discussions. You know what I'm saying? And you just to piggyback a little bit off of that KJV version of the Bible, you were right. That's the version. No, some people don't want to see the NIV. They don't want to see the Message version. Like none of that other stuff matters. It has to be the KJV. Like you said, as if the Lord wrote it himself, you know. So having that conversation about who did publish that book and when it came out and the other books that person wrote, oh Lord, you open a whole can of worms that, like you said, we'll discuss a little bit later. Well, the Geneva Bible, interesting thing for everybody to look into, okay? Like you said, plenty, but something that stuck out for one is, I think something that we don't talk about is not highlighted. Some of those founding values that are there and present, but they don't look pretty. So, you know, we don't give them credit, like capitalism. Like you said, that first colony was a business venture. Capitalism is ingrained in this country. And it's not necessarily bad, but it is, and it's something that should be acknowledged. You know what I mean? And even religion, the fact that, like you said, it was a business venture to help, you know, the pursuit of spreading religion. We like to seem much more open and unbiased than that. So we don't talk about those things. So that's something that stood out to me that I think should be highlighted, and everybody watching, just think about that. Is the system isn't so corrupted necessarily in different ways. It was built this way. You know what I mean? I find it really ironic, a few things too, knowing why, you know, the air quotes, the founding fathers, or those very first folks that decided to come over, why they came over, knowing that we are looking to escape, you know, religious persecution, more control coming from the government. And that was something that we didn't like. So I find that ironic when we look at how we treated those that were already here, and then how we're restricting immigration and like access to the land from folks currently. and constantly having that conversation when, you know, we talking as Americans, you know, that's, but we, the Americans, you know, set out for the same exact things as these folks. And then we're, you know, restricting them from it. So yeah, a lot of irony, really a lot of irony. We know that the first settlers came here, like we said, looking to escape religious persecution. But once they got settled, you know, many groups like the Puritans restricted other folks' religious practices. So again, like it's just the irony.
That was the funniest part to me, because I hadn't really realized what was happening, because in school it's like really kind of glossed over. It just says to escape religious persecution because they wanted to be able to practice freely, which, okay, amen, ashe, ayubobo, let's do that. However, when you go then and dig deeper to what it was that they wanted to do and why they were mad they couldn't do it, like, you can't just kill people because they don't want to practice the way you do. Like, you can't do that. And now we have a system where the government is like, in many ways, like, you can't do this because it's against religious beliefs. There is no scientific reason why you can't do this. There is no science behind it. And we'll talk about certain things specifically and later on in the series. But it's like, this is a religious belief. It's not necessarily based in science, and it's loosely based in morality. And I say very loosely based in reality, and, you know, in that. And then there's also, you know, certain other topics that have nothing to do with morality. You just don't like it because it's in that King James version, they made it seem like it's bad. But literally, it's only in the Abrahamic religions where it's even talked about. No other religion cares. No other religion cares. It's just the Abrahamic. It's just the big three. They're the only ones that care. And people act like those are the only religions, and they're not.
Totally agreed. We see so much where, like you said, spiritual views and beliefs are what's really leaning the conversation, when it's supposed to be political, it's supposed to be community based, it's supposed to be about the people and all those things, and it's not. But again, we see that it's been like that since the beginning.
It started that way. So yeah, it's so ingrained that we didn't even know that that was the real reason, because like I said, I didn't know it was that deep. And then when I was reading this article, I said, wait a minute, hold on. What did I say? They wanted to do what? And they was mad that England said no. And that's why they came here. They came here because they wanted to forcibly make people practice the way that they wanted to. And England said, you can't do that. And that's why they came here. So not only were they colonizers by rights, but they were also control freaks by rights to start off with. And these are the people who just wiped out entire civilizations. And now we have a country that we have a country.
We have a country.
We have a country.
And for that we will be grateful.
For that, we have a country, and we have the freedom to have this conversation online. But there are still consequences to even this conversation. Like, our conversations are going to be they're going to be from love. They're not going to be from, you know, a hateful place for anyone, which is rare. Most conversations of a political sphere, especially as it relates to religion, they don't come from a loving place. And so we're going to try to shed some light on some of those things. So yeah, this was why and how them people came over here. Interesting. Please do more.
It makes me ask too. It makes me wonder, and just wonder how other people feel about it. You know, we talk about freedom of religion, and that's supposed to be, you know, one of our rights. So does freedom of religion mean freedom to impose those beliefs on other people? Or should freedom of religion mean to protect individual rights across diverse beliefs?
And does it only mean the big three?
Mm-hmm.
And really, does it only really mean Christianity? Because I was in high school during 9/11. I remember seeing the hate spewed at Islam and people who were Muslim, um, specifically people who were from the Middle East who were Muslim, who had already been here, people that there was never a problem with them before. And then 9/11 happened, and now all of a sudden they're the enemy. And a lot of hateful things happened. Hate crimes were committed. And I think people gloss over that. Like, them people didn't do nothing. They was over here minding their business. In most cases, it's literally like 5 to 10% of Islam is extremists. The rest are like normal people. And I don't know a single extremist. I know a lot of people who are Islamic. I don't know any of them that are extremists. All of them are like so kind and loving and just good people. But you wouldn't know that the way that the media kind of like skews the perception of their religion.
Mm-hmm. We have this really interesting way in the US with the media to not be the bad guys. Because even as you said, that is like, no, and we can't minimize any one group's experience. But if we go back a little while, I think about even the Chinese internment camps when folks weren't even Chinese, you know what I'm saying? But they look Asian. And so here you go, got to go down there to the internment camp. Or, just all the different ways. Like we talked earlier about the natives, even, you know what I mean? How, like you said, there was a decimation of an entire group of people. Almost no, bloodlines are strong. Yes, they still live, but millions of people were wiped away. You know what I mean? And then when you read the books, when you read the articles, it kind of doesn't paint it that way.
No, not anything, at least from when I was growing up. Anything that was written prior to maybe 2000 is not going to really give any good insight as to what actually happened. I didn't start learning what actually happened until I was a full grown adult.
Mm-hmm.
It was Google. Okay. It was this new information age that we have where, information is at your fingertips and you can actually learn stuff. But before that, if they didn't teach it to you in school, there was almost no way to actually learn it because unless you went to a library and you just sitting in the library, just read about shit. And I tell you, wasn't nobody doing that.
You didn't even know what to look up because it's like you didn't know what you didn't know.
Right.
You ain't even know what to be studying, really.
And the information was very skewed. It was very skewed, even definitely in our textbooks in school. The information was skewed. Like all I know is then people came to escape religious persecution, and on the face of it, that sounds completely normal and fine. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be able to practice in the way you want to practice. But then when the way you want to practice involves murder of people, and how we can say it's okay to unalive people because of religion, nothing else, because they don't believe and do as we say. But that unborn child in your womb, how dare you? Mm-hmm. How dare you? Which we will talk about that later. So it's like, what are we doing here? It's the hypocrisy of it all that is really jarring to me.
That's the word too. Like I was playing with like irony and maybe even like contradiction, but no, it's hypocrisy. I agree. That's what it is.
It's straight hypocrisy.
Yeah.
So we encourage everyone to look into the religious persecution that, really got this country going and the things that happened thereafter. We are going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to talk again about Roger Williams in another episode. And so look up Roger Williams. He's a Puritan minister. Look him up. That way, when you get to this next episode, when I start talking about separation of church and state, you're like, oh, I know what you're talking about. Because it's something, child. It's something. Priestess, do you have anything else you wanted to add to this one?
That was it. It's really just to think about that. Think about all of it and how the foundation of our country, the foundation of our system has, led to and brought us to where we are now.
Absolutely. So we will see you guys in the next episode.